Hi, welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching, where we're going to get a bit on the emerging technologies in financial services, all these things with iPhones and all of this, and how to do your financial services. But first, we're going to bring you an important update on a variety of stories related to the Penn State sexual abuse case. Put another way, the fallout from that, all of that following these words.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Hi, welcome back to the program. Well, the fallout from the Penn State sexual abuse case continues to be a huge issue in the state among a whole variety of constituencies, both in the legal community, in the legislature, among Penn State alums. We're going to do a review of some of the important issues related to that on this part of Pennsylvania Newsmakers. Joining me to do that is Brad Bumsted. He's with the Pittsburgh-Tribune Review, and Charlie Thompson, Harrisburg Patriot-News Penn Live. Both of these guys have written a lot of stories about the Penn State matter. Charlie, I want to turn to you first. I mean, all of a sudden, you think this case is about done. Sandusky goes to jail. Everybody knows that. Convicted, 45 of 48 counts. It becomes a huge issue in the Attorney General's race. Kathleen Kane wins the Attorney General's race, you know, in some part because of the position she staked out, saying that the governor played politics, probably played politics. Then we have the Free Report before that. Penn State accepts it. There's controversies over that. Paterno's reputation gets sullied. They get, of all people, Dick Thornburg to weigh in, a former Attorney General and governor. Now we have the legislature saying, well, maybe the Board of Trustees is too big. Right. This thing you can't even keep all of it straight. Bring us up to date on what you're working on that it would be of some importance to our viewers.
Okay. Well, you know, the way I have been thinking about Penn State lately is sort of like the explosion has happened. Yeah. You know, Jerry Sandusky was arrested. Joe Paterno was fired. Take that as the explosion, but what remains is still a 4-alarm fire at Penn State. Right. And the four alarms are, in my mind, you still have criminal cases pending against Graham Spanier, former president, and 2 of his senior aides for obstruction of justice and you know, sort of activities related to covering up Sandusky's activity.
Trials to be held.
That's one. 2 is civil cases. They have now 30 plaintiffs who have come forward and alleged some form of sexual abuse at the hands of Sandusky. And Penn State is trying to settle out those cases, you know, with on the side, a raging battle against their primary insurance carrier, who has basically said, we don't want any business of covering Jerry Sandusky's acts. You know, we don't want to be exposed to that liability. So you have the civil cases. Number 3 is the whole question of the NCAA sanctions. There's tremendous pushback now, a tremendous sort of grassroots effort to say, let's get the NCAA to roll back some of these penalties against the football program. I said grassroots. It's probably a misnomer, because actually leading the charge there is Governor Corbett now with his lawsuit that seeks to avoid those.
And a lot of Penn State alums involved in that.
Right, right. So you have the battle over the NCAA penalties, and the 4th leg of this 4-alarm fire, if you use that analogy, would be the sort of what I have come to see as sort of like the internal battle for the soul of the university, because you've got this one faction of the board that hates what the prior board did in terms of ousting Paterno so quickly, and you know, they've got a lot of sway with alumni. They're probably going to win a few more seats in the next alumni election. Meanwhile, they're searching for a new president to take office in 2014. And, you know, so there's a lot of internal turbulence there.
Great summary. Let's pick up some of the pieces. Brad, you brought something, I mean, you before we started the program, there's still fallout from the grand jury.
There is.
Now, hold on, the grand jury. Explain what grand jury we're talking about.
What grand jury?
Yeah, the grand jury.
Sandusky grand jury.
Yeah, the grand jury. Go ahead.
Right. So basically, one of the key issues there that could affect the 3 cases involving former President Spanier is that the Cynthia Baldwin, who was general counsel for the university, was in the grand jury room as these people came in to testify. They say they thought she was their attorney and that she was representing them. But then she winds up testifying before the grand jury, and prosecutors want her to testify at a preliminary hearing, and they're going, hold it a minute, you know, what's the deal? They filed motions, and they're pending and it's not clear when there'll be a ruling, but it's crucial to the case going forward.
You know, one of the things, Charlie, that you brought up that I think is pretty important to talk about is, you know, at first, you know, there was a lot of perplexity over the role of Joe Paterno. Let's be honest. There was sort of an incredulous view, you know, Paterno, no. And then when you read the grand jury report, it was, you know, what did he know and when did he know it? We know that famous incident that was reported by, you know, one of the assistant football coaches, McCleary, you know, who said he saw the, you know, what went on, and when it was reported, the free report actually said that he was part of the cover-up, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong. He was part of it. Then we have Thornburg report coming back saying rush to judgment. The Paterno angle here still is pretty big, with lots of folks still saying Joe didn't know very much. It was not his, you know.
Yeah.
Am I right about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes to Paterno's just beyond iconic figure that he cast in Pennsylvania. I mean, and I don't know that I don't know how that issue ever gets resolved, but you know, in some ways, it. And I realize that it has a great emotional pull for a lot of people because Paterno was so beloved.
It does.
But in some ways, it's almost a sideshow to what's out there because, you know, I've had people who had been close to that investigation tell me that, you know, Paterno was never a target of our investigation.
We're going to a break. And, I want to pursue this. There are a couple of important questions that I want to ask after these words. They were in my ear.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania Business Council Education Foundation, educating citizens and business leaders about important public policy issues and civic affairs. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by BetterSaferRoads.com. To voice your support for safer highways and less traffic congestion, visit BetterSaferRoads.com. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Hi, welcome back to the program with Brad Bumsted and Charlie Thompson. Both are journalists. We're bringing you up to date on a whole variety of related activities to the fallout from the Jerry Sandusky sexual abuse conviction. Brad, there isn't any doubt that Kathleen Kane, in large part, won her election as Attorney General because of her criticism of the way in which the investigation and prosecution of Sandusky was handled by then Attorney General Tom Corbett. Bring us an update. Where does all that stand now?
Well, I agree with the way you laid that out, although there were certainly other factors, being the first woman. And,
no doubt about it.
But it was the one driving force there that I think attracted people to her campaign. And in the end, she got more votes than President Obama in Pennsylvania. And I think it's about not only about Governor Corbett when he was Attorney General, why it took so long to investigate, actually to bring charges against Sandusky, 33 months. But I think it's also to some Penn Staters about Paterno, where we talked about before. Is there any way to bring out the truth, the facts, what really happened there? So where it stands is that she has appointed a special deputy. They don't like to use the word special prosecutor. From Widener Law School, who's come in to try to put this together. There's been no date certain as to when this will come out, but that's a huge thing behind the scenes that's going on right now.
Yeah. All right, Charlie, shifting gears a bit, let's talk a little bit about the NCAA, the pushback, the acceptance of the NCAA, the acceptance of the free report. Critically, critically accepting it, or let me put it this way, not critically accepting it by the university, now has come under criticism after the NCAA does these harsh penalties, which I polled on this, the voters of the state don't like. Where does that all stand?
Well, I just did a story about that last week, just talking to people who have done a lot of work with the NCAA on legal cases and, athletic violations at other universities. And the consensus opinion is that as much as the NCAA and Mark Emmert, the president of the NCAA, is under fire now for problems internal and problems related to other investigations that they've done at like the University of Miami, where they essentially paid for some leaked information, you know, most people seem to feel like they don't see the NCAA voluntarily rolling back penalties on Penn State. Because the NCAA sort of feels like this is the place where we make our stand and we prove that, you know, that we have some moral fiber, and you know, it's also a fight for survival. I mean, they want to have dominion over college athletics, and they don't want to give that up. So the perception was if they get this consent decree and then a year and a half later they bargain it back, you know, to some lesser penalty.
Then that'll happen in every.
Nothing's ever final.
All right, we're gonna run. We need to run to a break again. Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about the pushback in the legislature as a result of that. You know, we have Senator Corman, powerful chairman of the Senate Appropriation Committee, who happens to represent Penn State. Penn State sits in his senatorial district, saying there was a rush to judgment. We got, you know, the Governor Corbett's lawsuit saying it was a rush to judgment. So we've got a bunch of interesting angles to this that I think we need to talk about, and we will do that in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the State System of Higher Education. 14 state-owned universities. The state system is the largest provider of higher education in Pennsylvania. And by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back. We're doing a review of the fallout from the Jerry Sandusky, Penn State Jerry Sandusky sexual abuse case with Charlie Thompson and Brad Bumsted, two of the state's leading reporters. All right, Brad. So Governor Corbett's on the Penn State board. He initially accepts the free report, turns around a little later and files suit in federal court, and bring us up to date on where that stands.
Well, the university and Governor Corbett had accepted the NCAA fines when they first came out, and fines and other penalties. Then 6 months later, Corbett files a suit and says, no, we want to get out from under these penalties. Key thing in a suit like this is whether the state has standing, meaning do they have the right to be in court to be suing this particular group. That's the key decision. If they get past that.
Yeah, but Penn State gets not arguably, you know, a couple $100 million from the budget of the state. They're, quote, state-related.
No question about it, but what about the NCAA? What right does the government of Pennsylvania have to do with that? I'm not sure. The other argument there, too, is as far as the NCAA, if somebody doesn't like the sanctions, they're terrible, they could drop out.
Yeah, well, yeah, but I don't think Charlie has a big smile on his face.
Well, it's hard for me. It's almost hard for me to imagine Penn State doing that. I think the university has, you know, more than 24 intercollegiate athletic programs.
Yeah, and, not likely.
You know, it's theoretical, but
yeah. You know, all right, we have about 45 seconds. I want to ask you very quickly. Legislature's now starting to react to this. We hear from Jake Corman, I pointed out, who said they accepted this uncritically. We've got a hearing coming up in the legislature later this month, I think, on is the Penn State board. Are you hearing more reaction out of the legislature in recent months? Brad, let me start with you.
Only because of the passage of a bill by Senator Corman that would take the settlement money from the NCAA and try to maintain that all of that money should be spent in Pennsylvania, not go to other states. And legally, there may be difficulties with that.
All right, they're telling me we got to go. We got to do our next update. Look, we'll have you guys back at next time we have some big moment and that could be any day now, given all the complexity to it. All right, we'll be back. We'll bring you up to date on all of these new technologies in the financial services that you use for our popular monthly financial literacy update time in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Highmark Blue Shield, changing the way health plans work for business with a variety of plan options for employers and more choices for employees. Information is available at highmark.com. Have a greater hand in your company's health. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care.
Hi, welcome back to the program. We're going to do this popular financial literacy update. Boy, this is a segment you don't want to miss on these emerging technologies. I want to say one thing. We are in real trouble when Mike Wishnow and Bob Marquette on the program are going to quote Bob Dylan. We are in real trouble, guys. The times they are a change. You didn't come up with that, did you, buddy?
I'm sorry, I did. I got teased.
All right, that's Mike Wishnow. You've been on the program many times. He's a senior VP with the Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. And, of course, Bob Marquette, he's the CEO of Members First Federal Credit Union. He's been on the show a lot. You guys are really, I mean, I can't, go ahead. I'm not even going there. We're moving on. All right, Michael, I'm going to start with you. These emerging technologies, mobile banking, using your iPhone to make, I mean, this is pretty complicated stuff. What's the overall message before we get into the bits and pieces that you want to leave with folks?
Well, the financial services industry is moving toward convenience. And despite our average age around this table, our younger folks, our children, and of course our grandchildren, will be using every kind of gizmo and gadget, and they want it quick, they want it now, and they want it safe. Right. And that's what the financial services industry is willing to deliver.
Yeah. And you would say this is being driven by consumer demand. This is a consumer-oriented change, to put it that way?
Absolutely. Consumers want convenience, and convenience is absolutely delivered on the internet and electronic services.
Right. All right, I want to get into the bits and pieces of this. You know, talk a little bit about mobile banking and prepaid cards and get into the nitty-gritty of it, which you got to listen to because you're going to be using it, or someone in your family is going to be using it. But one of the concerns that we always hear raised are security, security, security. You know, we even have it with credit card fraud. You and I, you know, we've all talked about that. How secure is this, and what?
Frankly, these emerging technologies are probably more secure than anything else that we've done. As we progress, security is at the forefront. It's certainly more secure than walking around with a pocket full of cash or your check. Actually, the credit cards are pretty secure, wouldn't you say, Bob?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and there's consumer protections, too, written in the law. Yes, there's fraud, but the consumers are protected. I know with Visa and MasterCard, they have a zero liability policy for consumers, so they're protected.
But it is a pain in you-know-what. You can spend hours trying to get this. My wife just went through it again. Yeah, I mean, it is a real pain. I mean, but at any rate, all right, let's go ahead. I'm gonna come with you. Let's talk a little bit. How are these emerging technologies involved in what you call mobile banking?
Well, mobile banking, there's a couple things you're going to be affected with mobile banking. I mean, that's the wave of the future. It's growing exponentially every year. People like it because it's quick.
How do you mobile bank?
You mobile bank with your iPhone, your smartphone.
All right,
I mean,
go through it. Tell me how it works.
You can check your balances, you can transfer funds, you can set up bill pay, you can take a picture of a check you receive and deposit in your account. I mean, it is slick. It's a lot faster than internet banking, and people really, really like it.
Yeah. All right, prepaid cards. You get the next big chunk to deal with.
Well, prepaid cards are becoming more and more prevalent in the marketplace for a number of reasons. One, they have the same security factors as a credit card would, but a parent, for example, could preload it with $50 for Junior to make sure that Junior only spends $50 on the card.
Nice try on that one.
Or $100, or whatever it is, yeah. Once the prepaid card has reached its maximum, it's essentially out. Many of them are reloadable, right, Bob?
Yes.
And so, you know, you can give Junior $50 a month, or whatever you want to do. but it's a way to sort of manage funds.
All right, now here's a real Bob Dylan type question for you, since you guys brought this up. What is a digital wallet? Who wants to even explain that to me? I never heard that term before. A digital wallet? Come on.
Digital wallet is a couple things. Number one, digital wallet allows you to set up notices that you can receive. So you're alerted to transactions that are occurring on your credit card or debit card. Also, it involves working with participating merchants that you give them a PIN number instead of your card. And that PIN number then is matched up to information that the credit card company stores. So the merchant never really gets the card. So it limits your exposure for fraud.
Yeah, that's a pretty...
And one of the things that Bob was talking about with respect to limiting fraud, if you use the digital wallet, I was just talking to a gentleman, he was at dinner, he used his Visa card, handed it to the waiter went and charged it. Before the waiter got back to the table with the credit card, he had an e-alert on his phone that there had been a charge. Now, if that charge was not a legitimate charge, then he immediately knows, he can immediately notify his financial institution, and he can become part of the fraud minimization program.
Well, you get that. I mean, I noticed that, you know, we have a lot of different web addresses that we use to access, you know, not financial transactions, but sort of secure websites. And if it says, we'll send you a notice if somebody logs on from another computer, you know, or from an iPhone or whatever. And that's pretty neat, too, because it tells you if you use a passcode to get into... And again, I'm not talking about financial... So it's literally along the same line, right?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, basically...
And it's happening in the financial world, too, right, Bob?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. I mean, we're using terms I've never heard before. Perhaps you have out there. An EMV chip technology. Who wants to try that one on?
Go ahead, Bob.
EMV chip.
Actually, EMV chip cards have been used in Europe for the past 10 years. Instead of having a mag stripe on the card like we have in our country, it actually has a chip embedded in the card that contains your information. Much more secure, much less prone to fraud issues. It's been used in Europe, like I said, for 10 years. We're moving that way in this country. By 2015, 2017, it's envisioned we will be there. It's a situation right now of getting the retailers and the merchants to buy the equipment necessary to handle those transactions through that technology.
All right, before I let you guys go, before we end this segment, Mike, you're always talking to me about steps consumers can take to protect themselves. We have about 30 seconds. Give me the quick 3 or 4 things you want to do.
Well, first of all, password protect your devices, your iPads, your iPhones, all that kind of stuff. Protect your card information like it was cash. Bob, you were the one that was talking about that this morning. What else would you say?
We had a situation where one of our members...
I got to go. You're not going to get done. Sorry. Okay. We're out of time. The guy's saying we're done. Hold that thought. We'll pick it up maybe next month. All right. We'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And as always, stay well.